advised all the resort personnel to smile as the guests got off the plane since they loved the scenic beauty of these locations. Julia, the personal assistant of Mr. Rourke, the owner of Fantasy Island, welcomed the visitors and took them to their accommodations. According to Julia, everything is possible on this island. Melanie unpacked and placed a photograph of a young guy on the nightstand as Julia informed Gwen that Mr. Rourke was fulfilling his customers' wishes. Gwen based this on a questionnaire. When Julia went outside, she felt unwell. Gwen saw marks on the floor and began to look around the room in the mirror. She saw a burned man who had suddenly disappeared in the evening. The guests were gathered at the bar. A guy named Patrick met Braxton J.D. Despite their different appearances, the guys were brothers. Finally, Mr. Rourke came. He told 2 conditions, only 1 fantasy for each guest, and each fantasy must be seen through to the end. The first in line were the brothers. Are you enjoying this video? Click that sexy subscribe button. Mr. Rourke escorted them to the best party when a charred guy came and vanished. In the morning, Mr. Rourke called Gwen Olson, who wanted to fix a mistake. Brax assumed he was hallucinating. Gwen claimed she always wanted a daughter, but when her lover, Alan, asked her to marry him, she was scared and said no. Rourke said that the lady regained that moment of life by declaring that her dream was waiting beyond that door. Gwen was skeptical but opened the door behind it and saw the restaurant where Alan had proposed to her. Everything looked exactly the same, down to the smallest detail. She was even more shocked when she saw her beloved. She does not understand how the orc made it happen. She asked Alan not to pretend because they had not seen each other for 5 years, and she finds it strange that he has not aged at all. Gwen approached Rourke and asked him to stop this madness. Patrick and Melanie's fantasy has not started. Patrick told his mother that he had always wanted to join the military, but he promised not to. Melanie said her biggest want is to avenge Sloane, a school bully. Melanie wants to swap places with her at least once in her life. When she was a child, Mr. Rourke told Melanie to go to the elevator and press the button without the floor number. When the doors opened, Melanie found herself in a dark room with Sloane tied up. She thought it was a hologram and took revenge on her abuser without remorse. Melanie clicked several buttons, harming Sloane. The glass was one way, so the girl could not see her executor. The screen began broadcasting films of Sloane having fun with someone else's spouse. Melanie released the video on social media. Melanie recognized it was not a hologram when Sloane's spouse showed her Sloane being taken. Rourke handed Patrick a military outfit in the woods. After changing, Patrick heard a rumbling. There were soldiers holding weapons at him. Patrick started to play, believing it was a pleasant game. He stated that he reportedly fought off his detachment, but the troops did not believe him and took him to the lieutenant while Indian Brax continued to enjoy the party. After supper at the restaurant, Alan asked Gwen to marry him again, and she said yes. The brothers changed into fancy outfits and discovered a hidden chamber in the apartments full of weaponry. The troops told Patrick they had to liberate the American prisoners. Patrick was brought before Lieutenant Sullivan. His vase seemed familiar, and the lieutenant was astonished to discover his name on Patrick's badge. Gunfire erupted. Patrick was astonished to learn that people were dying here while Melanie tried to escape. Suddenly, a guy in a doctor's garb with surgical equipment entered Sloanesville. Melanie attempted to halt the lunacy, but as the doctor took off his mask, she recognized her psychologist and neutralized him with electric shocks and water. Melanie smashed the glass and liberated Sloane. Place ending up in the woods, the brothers continued to enjoy themselves when suddenly all the guests began to be shot at. Brax called Rourke Hukami, who said it was the guise of Kalashiv, the previous owner of the island. The brothers wanted everything after all, but their fantasies might not appeal to everyone. The Kalashiv guys burst into the cottage, pointing guns at the brothers. Melanie lied to Sloane about being kidnapped too, but she managed to escape. Melanie understood Sloane did not know her since she was the underdog at school when the psychologist caught up with them. The men rescued the females by telling them to go with him to live. Sullivan candidly asked Patrick how he acquired his image. Patrick stated the picture shows him at 9 years old with his father to support his tale. Patrick and Sullivan do not comprehend how this is possible given that his father perished in a Venezuelan rescue effort 27 years ago. Sullivan said this procedure will happen tomorrow morning. Gwen assumed a beloved Gwen wedding picture on her phone was altered. Rourke stated she and Alan had been married for 5 years, and when Gwen saw Alan appear older, she noticed a small child called Lila. Rourke said it was her daughter, and her phone was full of family photos and videos. Sullivan intends to abandon the rescue operation and escape with his son. Patrick convinces his father not to do it because without him, the soldiers will die. Sullivan saved them 27 years ago by covering a grenade with himself. The brothers assured the guys that they had never heard of Kalashov. The gang leader took off his mask and demanded to know where the money was. Tortured brothers cannot grasp what they are saying. GD had to pretend that the money was downstairs since the ringleader brought it down there to make sure Gwen spends time with her family, which she has always dreamed of, but that is not the previous error she wanted to right. She requested another fantasy, but Rourke reminded her of the rules. Melanie and Sloan followed Damon to the island's center to glimpse their innermost desires. Damon told them that he was a private detective and that a client had hired him to solve the island's mystery. He told the girls to flee the island and gave them the pilot's number. Sloan discovered Melanie was not a prisoner, but a visitor. The same ugly girl Sloan used to make fun of at school, but now the girls must act together. Gwen sees Julia's illness and admits that 6 years ago, she killed a guy. She wants another dream to undo the past. Mr. Rourke decided to change Gwen's fantasy after all. She entered that very room again, as in the past there had been a fire in the building. Gwen was surprised to see Braxton. Gigi, of course, they did not recognize her, and Nick could not open the door and get out. Gwen ran to the aid of a police officer, Patrick, who said they had to wait for the fire department, so Gwen went back into the building herself. Brax tried to escape from Kalashov's men. The RAC threatened to ignite an explosive if the men disobeyed. Patrick and Brax neutralized Kalashov's troops, while Sullivan freed JG. Brax grabbed the grenade at the last second. JD was shot. A shootout started, and Sullivan I had died in front of his son. Melanie and Sloan returned to the torture room and reached Sloan's husband again, who agreed to assist even though he was furious at her for her infidelity. Sloan requested that he call Damon's phone. Julia dragged one out of the flames, but could not rescue Nick again. Patrick Brax Melanie, and Salo's primary job was to travel to the dock and flee the island in the aircraft, but Rourke thwarted their intentions. Gwen comes and finds that Nick Taylor, Brax and JD's roommate, died because she unintentionally sparked the fire. Melanie was supposed to go on a date with him that evening, and the company realized that this was one big fantasy that had to end in the deaths of the participants. Upon hearing the plane, the company rushed to flee, but the plane was blown up by Kalashov's men, and the participants were wondering what to do now. Melanie remembered Damon's words. They have to destroy the spring of strange water to destroy the fantasies. With the grenade ready, the company headed for the cave almost. Melanie assaulted Patrick and went to Brax, but it turned out that she was seeking vengeance for her boyfriend Nick, and that all these people were to blame for his murder to divert attention from her. Melanie Sloan said she was even more pathetic than she was in school. Seizing the moment the company dashed off when they saw the heart of the island, they realized Julia was Rourke's wife, who had long since passed away. The island brought her back as she had been when she fell ill. Taking care of her was too hard, and Rourke lied told her that she was his assistant. If Rourke stops fulfilling clients' fantasies, Julia will disappear. He neutralized the grenade for the Fanta Sloan, drank spring water to satisfy her fantasy. Melanie was pulled beneath the ocean and would be with Nick forever. Patrick covered the grenade to rescue his friends. Gwen woke up in bed and saw Braxton Sloan, who had rescued them. Patrick died like a hero. His father would have been proud of him. The aircraft went in for all the survivors. Boriaki remained on the island to accomplish his new dream of bringing the brother back to life. Did you enjoy the video? Click that sexy subscribe button. Now click this video. Don't miss its shocking and sexy ending.